Welcome back to Grassroots Radio Colorado on KLZ 560. This is Kris Cook. I've got Cori and Andy Pate, the party of choice, in studio with me. We're talking about poverty. We're talking about Baltimore. We're talking about how to have this conversation with folks about why these policies are not working, and how to propose something better. So these policies are not working, are they, Andy?
No, absolutely not. And if you're talking to somebody, I want to look at them and then say, look, here are the results. Here are the results of politicians or a political party giving you not what you need, but what they want you to have, so you'll need them.
Oh,
okay? Here are the results of that. The war on poverty was actually started in 1965, with FDR. Wow. There, JFK, and then Lyndon Johnson, LBJ.
Right. LBJ.
All the alphabet soup out there of presidents and all this. At least when we do it, it's one letter. R. Ronnie. W. Okay. So the war if you go back about 15 years prior to that, the funny thing is when the war on poverty came about, we were already improving drastically, quickly in that area. In 1950, roughly 32% of the country was in the poverty level. It was a horrible time coming off the war.
Right.
And so 32% in poverty level. By the time 1965 came around and they started the war on poverty, we were already down to 18%. It had already dropped almost by half.
Without a war on poverty.
Without doing anything.
Right.
Okay, and that was all simply job creation in the private sector. It was all just, job creation. That's all it was. And Kennedy and LBJ basically said the same thing. It's funny. They said the goals of their program, quoting here, Kennedy said it was to take people from dependence to independence.
That's what they always say.
Right. And LBJ said to make taxpayers out of tax eaters. Well, folks, $15 trillion later, it hasn't
a lot
worked.
Of tax eaten.
Yeah, but here's how to look at the trend is incredible. So it was dropping at a consistent rate. It didn't just drop off a table. It was at a consistent rate from the 32 down to 18, and it continued going down to, it bottomed out at about 1972. Poverty, we only had about 12%.
Wow.
Of the country.
Okay.
Now we're at 15 again.
Right.
And what it did was, once people started to get really dependent on, once people started to need the politicians, once they started to realize they weren't getting what they needed, so they just needed the politicians.
Right.
And the hopelessness started setting in. Then poverty, since then, has bounced around from in the 15% range and stayed there. It's been disastrous, and with a $15 trillion price tag.
Exactly.
There was no price tag before, and it dropped 12% in 15 years.
Right. Well, and the key is that the organic growth that we saw and the organic drop in the poverty rate over the course of the 50s and the early 60s was not attached to these policies that were absolutely destructive of the family, absolutely destructive of these communities, and therefore encouraging continued dependency.
Right, because you know why? Back then it was mainly just dad working, so we'll just say dad. Okay,
right.
I'm not being sexist here. The dad was going to a place that needed him.
Yeah.
By the way, mom did at times too. This really came about with World War II. People were going to places where they were needed. They had purpose. And guess what that did? They got hooked on capitalism.
Right. And they passed that along to their children.
Yes, they did. And they wanted to stay on capitalism. So the war on poverty came along with the idea. Here they put out these capitalistic things. We're going to take people from dependency to independency and so forth, make taxpayers instead of tax eaters. But these programs were designed. You gave people things. They didn't earn them.
Exactly.
Okay, they didn't merit them. And
How is that making them independent?
Right.
It's not.
So I'm talking to this person, and you're generally not going to be even talking to the person in the inner city. You're going to be talking to some liberal at work who defends the programs that created all this.
Exactly.
That's fine. And what I will say is this. Once again, they voted all this in. I can understand why. They saw one side offering a handout and they thought the other side wasn't. I think they're wrong, but they thought the other side wasn't. I get it. They chose what they thought was the only option. Problem is they didn't get what they needed. And as a result, with the war on poverty, we're 15 trillion further in debt that our kids have to pay off, because that all winds up in the debt. Money is fungible.
Yep.
And now you're 15 trillion further in debt. My gosh, the whole country's only 18 and a half. This has been a disaster.
Right.
And what was going down in poverty levels is now actually eked up. What a disaster.
Am I being cynical in thinking that the Democrat Party in the early 1960s looked at the rapid decrease over the course of the previous decade and said, we've got to create more poor people?
No. In fact, this is what I always say with the Democrats in public schools. They know the schools will create disinterest among parents because you give them no choice. You herd their kids like cattle.
Right.
And so the parents will have less interest in the schools, still care about their kids, but less interest in the schools. Right. They know it'll create disinterest among the kids as they're herded about like cattle. They know the results. They want those results. They want people dependent on them. That's the whole point. Beware the person who wants you to need them.
True.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't even date a girl, if I were still dating, or Cori date a guy. Would you want to date a guy who, I want you to need me?
Oh my gosh, no.
Okay. Well, that's an entire party saying that.
Exactly.
Right. What I want to do, by the way, though, you can't just go to them and say, what I'm going to do is cut out the crutches. No, man, we got to have something in between. Okay? We got to train them. We got to get them to crawl before they can walk.
Okay.
And that's what I want to do next.
Okay. Well, how do we do that?
Okay. Well, you've heard my program, Back in Business.
Yeah.
And what I do is I look at them and I say, folks, there's lots of programs. Let me just give you an example of what I would do. You'd still get the money. The public assistance you're getting, you'd still get it. But rather than sitting at home, having nowhere where you're needed, wondering, my goodness, will anybody ever call? Will anybody ever rely on me again? Forget that. We're going to have temp agencies place you after 4 weeks on welfare. We're going to have temp agency place you in businesses according to your skills. And they'll test your skills just like any temp agency does. Okay. The business they're going to be very happy. Now, they can only hire up to 10% roughly of their staff as back in business employees. Okay. Otherwise, it would mess with the payroll of the rest of their staff. And all they have to pay for you, the first 2 weeks, they don't pay a dime. Okay? It's training time.
Okay.
After that, they pay, I don't know, it would be different state by state, but let's say roughly a third of your benefits.
Okay. Aren't you subsidizing business by doing that?
Yep. Okay. As a temporary, as a stepping stone. But here's how it goes. First of all, business is now paying part of what you were getting, what the taxpayer was paying wholly. So businesses get cheap labor, which is good.
Right.
But it's only 10% of their labor.
Okay.
Number two, you're not waiting at home anymore. So not only is it good for business, it's good for you. You're not waiting at home anymore wondering, my gosh, will I ever get a phone call? You're out there working on your skills, being needed every day, getting your feet back in the game. You're back in business. Number three, it's great for the taxpayers. They're going to save millions of dollars. Number four, when the business wants to hire somebody, are they going to want to hire somebody they don't know or you? Well, they're probably going to want to hire you for two reasons. Number one, they know you.
Right.
You're already trained. And number two, once they move you onto their regular payroll, they get another back in business person. That's 2 more weeks of free pay, of free training time. Whereas most people, they got to pay to train. Okay. Now, what this does is, in time, it gets people hooked on capitalism.
What a concept.
Right. Folks, you got to, sometimes, the mama bird has to chew the food so the baby bird can, you see what I'm saying? And you're thinking, oh my gosh, we shouldn't have to pay a dime for any of this. Hey, my answer to you folks who say that, you're right. I agree, we shouldn't.
But getting from A to B is tougher.
Right. We can't get them from A to C without B.
Right.
This is the B, back in business. Okay. And they are going to be able to, and what they'll do is they'll get hooked on being needed again. Right. And there's nothing like being needed. There is nothing like having people say, Kris, and by the way, I
hear that usually as I'm running down the street away from those voices.
I know that. But here's the thing. And I want them to go through the bad stuff. I want them to go through having petty bosses and backstabbing employees and rotten customers who are demanding. I want them to go through the whole part of what makes you a stronger person. All of it.
Right.
Okay. And then, so now 20 hours, it's just 20 hours a week where you're going to work. You still have time to either job hunt elsewhere. Okay.
Okay.
The state is paying you less money than it was before, substantially less. Right? Whereas it was just paying you money. And now all these people in Baltimore, and have businesses in their community that, by the way, can afford some of the labor.
Right.
Because the businesses just go out of business. Okay. You now have a place to go. Businesses love you because you're helping them. And by the way, your coworkers, they're the greatest of all because they're going to look at you. Most of them have lost jobs. They're going to look at you and say, man, I'm glad you got a chance. Let me help you. Let me show you around.
I like. Has this been tested anywhere?
No, I came up with it. And then the next person then you get a job, the next back in business person comes in and now you are their support group.
Right.
Now you're looking at them saying, yeah, man, I've been there. This is awesome. Oh, now here's what you're going to hate. This is what really sucks. This is, and not because things at work can suck.
It can.
Oh, if I can use that language.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So, but that's an example. There are plenty of other ways. It doesn't have to be my program. That's mine. Okay. Design something, folks. But Republicans, conservatives, don't look at the inner city and come with nothing.
Right.
Come with a stepping stone. Otherwise, all you're doing is attacking their choices, and they will defend it, and you will lose them.
One of the other things that we have to fight back against, though, is the concept that work is bad. Work is punishment. Work is not the blessing that it actually is. And then this is pervasive in our culture. How do we fight back against that?
It's a place to be needed.
Well, do you sell that? I mean, does that actually sell? Do people actually hear that? People who don't normally listen to KLZ 560. So when we come back, let's talk about that a little bit. We've got Cori and Andy Page of the Party of Choice. Before we run to break, where can folks find you?
We are on Facebook, Google+, Twitter, and YouTube.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And thepartyofchoice.com.
Right.
Yeah. Andy and I have been struggling trying to get all four of those things out.
I've been listening, though. Even though I'm not here, you guys are doing all right.
Actually, she was. But...
I'm Kris Cook. You're listening to Grassroots Radio Colorado. We'll be right back after this.